So, welcome to our presentation, which will be an introduction into the academic study of religion. So, we are going to want to answer these questions. What is the academic study of religion? What is the origin of the academic study of religion? And what are the questions academic scholars of religion asking? So, in relation to the first question, what is the study of religion? We find a brief definition by Walter Capps, which is that religious studies attempts to provide training and practice in directing and conducting inquiry regarding the subject of religion. This is essentially to make religion intelligible. So to make something intelligible is to make it understandable, to be able to explain it. So it asks questions as to why religious people behave the way they do, believe what they do, how do they interpret and read their sacred texts. In other debates, it can be on what is an adequate definition of religion, what are the characteristics of religion, how do we distinguish between what is religious and not religious, questions like those. Importantly, religious studies is not theology. Theology is very much about standing within a specific religious tradition and articulating and explaining the doctrines and beliefs that are intrinsic to that religious tradition. Alternatively, scholars of religion stand on the outside of a specific religious tradition and look inside, so to speak. So it's more of a description. It's more of explaining a specific religious tradition or a specific religious individual without applying any value judgments and so on. This brings us to what is called phenomenology of religion. So this is essentially to say that scholars of religion study the manifest features of religious phenomena. So how does religion manifest in human daily experience, and answers to those questions are what excite scholars of religion. So this is often, as we'll see in our subsequent lecture, is very much about prioritizing and emphasizing the first-hand subjective primary religious experiences of individuals. So specifically to understand the reality that a specific person has or view of the world that's constructed through his and influenced by his religious beliefs. So we find that specifically in North America, that a scholar and historian of religion, Mircea Eliade, was particularly influential. We will also be returning to him because as a phenomenologist, he articulated and conceptualized an idea that has become quite often referred to in religious studies and academic literature. So our second question then is, what is the origin of the study of religion? If we trace it back, we find that it has its origins 200 to 300 years ago in what is known as the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment was very much a period in European history, specifically in countries like England, France, and Germany, and others, in which critical thinking and naturalistic scientific explanations were prioritized over and above or to the exclusion of religious dogma or religious explanations, or explanations provided by certain authorities, whether that be in the government or in the church, and so on. This very much proved to be a challenge to the religious tradition of the time, which is a very Christian one. The church was very influential, and scholars during this period were asking questions that were quite uncomfortable. We'll also be looking at some of those theorists shortly. This one expression, perhaps the most influential expression of Enlightenment thinking in how it came to influence religion studies as it is practiced today, is what is known as the Kantian paradigm proposed by Immanuel Kant. So this was essentially to search for the essence of religion. So what is religion? What is that basic core element of religion that without which something would not be rightly called religion? So in his attempt to answer that in very empirical and very human based, or like human experience based explanations, Kant provided three possibilities. So does religion belong to cognition, our ability to reason and think? Or does it belong to moral or ethical considerations? Or thirdly, does it belong to aesthetics? So what is clear here is that the Kantian paradigm is very much an expression of the Enlightenment mentality. In no point here do we see that Kant appealed to God as the essence of religion or divine revelation. So we find that over the next century, to the next 100 to 200 years, a number of other thinkers started playing around with the Kantian paradigm, which is either to add additional options to it or to revise certain points in the Kantian paradigm. So, for example, we find Rudolf Otto. He added a fourth possibility of the essence of religion, which he called the holy or the numinous, which he aptly encapsulated in his phrase, the mysterium tremendum. So what this was the very real experience of the religious individual, that of something very much other, that is both mysterious and awe-inspiring because of its otherness and its unknowability, but also something that's very fascinating and attractive. One might think of, say, the resurrection of Christ in the Gospels. When Christ appears to the disciples, it's very much a frightening experience. Some of them think he's a ghost, some of them think he's a spirit, or something along those lines, because they weren't expecting that. But at the same time, it's attractive. It has an appeal. So we learn in some of the Gospels, or the Gospel of John, that Christ allowed one of the disciples to touch the wounds on his body. So very much that sort of thing. Frederick Schleiermacher, another scholar, tried to locate the essence of religion in what he calls the feeling of absolute dependence. This is the idea that religion, we desire security in life because the universe is quite threatening, and human beings wish to find this security in something that's bigger and much vaster and superior than ourselves. So he described it as the wish to be absorbed into something bigger. Sigmund Freud came later, and as we know, he's the father of psychoanalytic theory. He had a particularly negative view of religion, which he explained was illusion. So very much at the center of religion is a lack of anything real. So religion functions as something to make people feel better, or to be able to deal with the human condition and vulnerability in a threatening world. He goes on to explain the idea of projection of a father figure, which we will be also looking at in a future